On a snowy December morning in 2009, a young mother tucked her two small boys into bed after church, never knowing it would be the last time she'd kiss them goodnight. The last time Susan Powell was seen alive, it was a quiet Sunday evening. She had spent the day with her husband and two young sons, a seemingly normal family in a suburban home. But behind the closed doors of that house in West Valley City, Utah, a story of obsession, control, and deep-seated psychological dysfunction was about to reach its horrifying climax. This is not a simple missing persons case. It's a journey into the darkest corners of a family's history, a narrative of a predator in plain sight, and a crime that would forever stain the memories of those who loved Susan and her children. The story of Susan Powell is a chilling testament to how a facade of normalcy can hide a profound and destructive evil. 15 years later, new evidence has emerged that might finally reveal what happened to Susan Powell on that fateful December night. Stay with me as we uncover the dark truth behind one of America's most haunting cold cases. To understand the end of Susan's story, we must first go back to the beginning of Joshua Powell's. Joshua was born into a deeply troubled household in Puyallup, Washington. His father, Stephen Powell, was a man consumed by abuse and a twisted sense of control. According to later court filings, Stephen's behavior was nothing short of horrific. He shared pornography with his sons, refused to set boundaries, and ran a home where normalcy was a foreign concept. As a teenager, Joshua's own disturbing behavior began to surface. He allegedly killed gerbils belonging to his sister and once threatened his mother with a butcher knife. The dysfunction of his childhood left an indelible mark, laying the groundwork for the possessive and controlling person he would become. When he was a student at the University of Washington, he began a relationship with a woman named Catherine Terry Everett. The relationship was marked by his possessive and controlling tendencies. He refused to let her visit her family alone, placing restrictions and limitations on her life. When Catherine finally took a trip to Utah, she made the courageous decision not to return, breaking up with him over the phone. Susan Cox, on the other hand, was born on October 16, 1981, a bright, ambitious young woman who dreamed of a happy family life. She was a trained cosmetologist with a warm personality and deep faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In November 2000, at an LDS Institute dinner party in Tacoma, Washington, Susan's life would take a fateful turn when she met Joshua Powell. Josh was a business student at the University of Washington, and at first glance, he seemed like the perfect match. But beneath his charming exterior lay something far more sinister. Josh and Susan married in April 2001 at the Portland, Oregon temple. They seemed like a happy couple to the outside world, but cracks began to show almost immediately. After their wedding, they moved in with Josh's father, Stephen Powell, in South Hill, Washington, and this is where our story takes its first disturbing turn. Stephen Powell developed what can only be described as an obsessive infatuation with his daughter-in-law. He would follow Susan around the house with a camcorder, filming her without consent. He used a small mirror to spy on her while she used the bathroom. He stole her underwear from the laundry and read her personal journals. Perhaps most disturbingly, he posted love songs online under fake names, dedicating them to Susan. The situation reached a breaking point in 2003 when Stephen actually confessed his romantic feelings to Susan, who rightfully rejected him. Ironically, this confrontation was accidentally captured by Stephen's own camcorder. The Powells couldn't leave fast enough, relocating to Utah partly to escape Stephen's increasingly inappropriate behavior. Susan and Josh settled in West Valley City, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City. Susan found work with Wells Fargo Investments while Josh worked various business jobs. They welcomed two sons, Charles in January 2005 and Braden in January 2007. But behind closed doors, their marriage was crumbling. Susan's journal entries and emails painted a picture of mounting marital discord. Josh was becoming increasingly controlling, exhibiting what Susan's friends described as extremely controlling behavior. He refused to attend church with his family, despite Susan's strong faith. More troubling, he maintained contact with his father Stephen despite knowing about Stephen's inappropriate advances toward Susan. Josh's financial irresponsibility added another layer of stress. In 2007, he filed for bankruptcy, declaring over $200,000 in debts. His extravagant spending habits put tremendous strain on the family finances. By July 2008, Susan was living in fear. She recorded a video documenting property damage she attributed to Josh, and she wrote what would prove to be a prophetic secret will. In it, she stated, "I want it documented that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage, and, chillingly, if I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." These weren't the words of a woman contemplating leaving her family, as Josh and Stephen would later claim. These were the words of a woman who feared for her life. December 6, 2009, began as a typical Sunday for the Powell family. Susan attended church with 4-year-old Charlie and 2-year-old Braden. A neighbor visited them at home that afternoon, leaving around 5 p.m. This neighbor was the last person outside the Powell household to see Susan alive. The next morning, December 7th, alarm bells started ringing when the Powell children didn't show up at daycare. Josh's mother, Terica, and his estranged sister, Jennifer Graves, went to check on the family. When they couldn't make contact, they called the police. Officers broke into the house, initially fearing carbon monoxide poisoning. Inside, they found an eerie scene. 2 box fans blowing at a wet spot on the couch, Susan's purse, wallet, and identification still in the house. Susan had simply vanished. At 5 p.m., Josh returned home with Charlie and Braden and was immediately taken to the police station for questioning. His story was bizarre and inconsistent. He claimed he'd left Susan sleeping at home shortly after midnight and taken his 2 young sons on a camping trip to the Pony Express Trail in western Utah. Think about this for a moment. What kind of father takes a 2-year-old and 4-year-old camping in the middle of the night during a blizzard? Especially when they're supposed to go to daycare just hours later. Josh hadn't even told his boss he wouldn't be coming to work, claiming he thought it was Sunday rather than Monday. When police visited the supposed campsite on December 10th, they found nothing. No evidence of recent camping activity, no signs that anyone had been there. Josh's story was falling apart. After a second round of police questioning on December 8th, Josh's behavior became even more suspicious. He rented a car at Salt Lake City International Airport, and his whereabouts for the next 18 hours remain a complete mystery. When he finally contacted his mother from a new phone while driving on Interstate 84, he told Jennifer Graves he'd been driving laps around the city, getting on and off freeways at random. Police later discovered that Josh had put an additional 807 miles on that rental car's odometer. Those were 807 miles that could have taken him anywhere, including to a remote location where a body might never be found. When investigators searched the Powell residence on December 9th, what they found painted a picture of premeditation and violence. There were traces of Susan's blood on the floor. They also found life insurance policies on Susan totaling a staggering $1.5 million and a handwritten letter from her expressing fear for her life. DNA tests later revealed that one blood sample matched Susan, while another came from an unknown male contributor. Someone else had been in that house, someone whose identity remains a mystery to this day. Josh's actions after Susan's disappearance were those of a guilty man covering his tracks. He liquidated Susan's retirement accounts. He canceled her regularly scheduled chiropractic sessions. He withdrew the children from daycare. Perhaps most damning, a coworker also recalled a conversation in which Joshua had asked about the best way to hide a body in an abandoned mineshaft in the Utah desert. The children themselves provided some of the most heartbreaking and revealing testimony. Charlie, the 4-year-old, confirmed that the camping trip took place, but unlike his father, he said Susan had gone with them and simply didn't return. He told a teacher weeks later that his mother was dead. Even more disturbing, Susan's parents reported that while at daycare months after the disappearance, 2-year-old Braden drew a picture of a van with people in it and told caregiver, "Mommy was in the trunk." These weren't the confused ramblings of traumatized children. These were consistent accounts that directly contradicted Josh's story. By December 24, 2009, Josh was officially named a person of interest. On January 6, 2010, he returned to Utah with his brother Michael to pack up their belongings. The message was clear: he wasn't coming back. Back in Puyallup, Washington, Josh moved in with his father Stephen, along with brothers Michael and John, and sister Alina. The house became a fortress of dysfunction and denial. Soon after, a website called SusanPowell.org appeared online, described as the official website of Susan Powell, which was widely believed to have been created by Joshua and Stephen. The anonymous posts defended Josh as the victim of a smear campaign and promoted bizarre theories about Susan's disappearance. One theory suggested Susan had run off to Brazil with Stephen Kocher, a journalist who had vanished in Nevada the same week. Both Josh and Stephen claimed Susan had abandoned her family due to mental illness. Susan's family knew these claims were false, unsupported by any evidence. The investigation expanded to include Stephen Powell when authorities learned of his obsession with Susan. When they searched his house in 2010, they discovered over 4,500 images of Susan taken without her knowledge, including disturbing close-ups of specific body parts. Stephen had been secretly photographing his daughter-in-law for years. He claimed in interviews that he and Susan had been falling in love. Brother Michael also became a person of interest when investigators discovered he'd sold his broken-down Ford Taurus to a wrecking yard in Oregon shortly after Susan's disappearance. Even more suspicious, he'd later ordered satellite images of that same wrecking yard. When police found the car, a cadaver dog was brought to the car and it indicated decomposing human remains had been in the trunk, though DNA tests proved inconclusive. In September 2011, authorities thought they'd found Susan's grave at Topaz Mountain, a desert area Josh frequented for camping. There were signs of recent digging, but after carefully excavating the site, they found nothing. It was another dead end in a case full of false hopes. Meanwhile, the custody battle for Charlie and Braden was heating up. Stephen Powell's arrest on charges of voyeurism and child pornography in September 2011 gave Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, the opportunity they needed to petition for custody. Computer evidence showed Stephen had secretly videotaped numerous young girls and women, including Susan. A Washington court granted the Cox family temporary custody, but with a devastating condition: Josh could regain custody if he moved out of Stephen's house and underwent psychological evaluation. Josh rented a house in South Hill, but authorities suspected he never actually lived there, merely creating the appearance of compliance while continuing to live with his father. The court-ordered psychological evaluation, conducted by James Manley, revealed Josh to be a man with adequate parenting skills but significant psychological issues. Manley noted Josh's inability to admit to normal personal shortcomings, his overbearing behavior with his sons, and his persistent defensiveness and paranoia. Despite these red flags, Manley recommended supervised visitations several times a week. Then came another bombshell. West Valley City Police discovered approximately 400 images of simulated child pornography, bestiality, and incest on a computer seized from the Powell residence. While not technically illegal due to their cartoon-like nature, these images raised serious concerns about Josh's psychological state. What makes this discovery even more troubling is what we learned years later. In 2019, the Cold podcast revealed that these images weren't actually Josh's. They belonged to the previous owner of a computer Susan had purchased secondhand. But at the time, authorities didn't know this, and the images factored into custody decisions that would prove fatal. The system was failing at every level. Social workers prioritized Josh's parental rights over the safety of two vulnerable children. Courts ignored mounting evidence of his involvement in his wife's disappearance. Everyone involved seemed to be playing by rules that Josh was determined to break. February 5, 2012, started like any other supervised visitation day. Social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall arrived at Josh's South Hill house with Charlie and Braden for their scheduled visit with their father. But something was different this time. Josh seemed agitated, urgent. As they approached the door, Josh suddenly grabbed both boys and pulled them inside, slamming the door in Hall's face. She immediately called 911, reporting that Josh wouldn't let her enter for the supervised visit. Within minutes, the house erupted in flames. The explosion was so powerful it could be heard for miles. Josh had turned his home into a death trap, using 2 5-gallon cans of gasoline spread throughout the house. But the horror didn't end there. When investigators sifted through the wreckage, They discovered that Josh had attacked both children with a hatchet before the fire consumed them all. The official cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, but both Charlie and Braden had significant chopping injuries to their heads and necks. These innocent children, who had already lost their mother, spent their final moments in terror at the hands of the man who was supposed to protect them. Josh's actions in the days leading up to the murder-suicide revealed careful planning. He'd withdrawn $7,000 from his bank account, donated the children's toys and books to charity, and sent goodbye emails to friends and relatives. He'd named his brother Michael as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a calculated act of ultimate selfishness. When authorities notified Stephen Powell, who was in jail, he showed no emotion about the deaths of his grandsons. His only anger was directed at the authorities who delivered the news. The tragedy didn't end with the deaths of Josh, Charlie, and Braden. 1 year later, in February 2013, Michael Powell jumped from a parking garage roof in Minneapolis, killing himself. Police had been questioning him repeatedly about his role in Susan's disappearance, and he'd grown increasingly evasive about his abandoned car found in Oregon. Utah authorities believe Josh and Michael were accomplices in Susan's murder. West Valley City Police closed their active investigation in May 2013, stating their belief that Josh killed Susan and Michael helped conceal her body. Stephen Powell was released from prison in July 2017 after serving nearly 6 years. He died of natural causes in Tacoma in July 2018, taking any secrets he might have had to his grave. The Cox family fought for justice in the courts, winning a $98 million judgment against Washington's Department of Social and Health Services for negligence that led to the children's deaths. They also pushed for legislative changes to prevent parents under investigation for murder from receiving unsupervised visitation rights. Now, 15 years after Susan's disappearance, new developments continue to emerge. In December 2024, KSL's Cold podcast conducted an experiment that revealed the likely source of a key piece of evidence found in Josh's minivan, a chunk of melted metal that had puzzled investigators for years. While the results of this experiment haven't been fully disclosed, it represents ongoing efforts to solve this case. Recent podcast episodes have also focused on Charlie Powell's police interviews, examining his statements about Susan staying where the crystals are, a clue that investigators believe may hold the key to finding Susan's remains. In recent years, the search for Susan's remains has continued. In early 2022, a team of cave explorers, led by TV personality Dave Sparks, took up the challenge of searching a mine shaft in the Utah desert. The team discovered several rib bones, scraps of clothing, and other possible evidence of human remains. The discovery sent a jolt of hope through the family and true crime communities. But DNA tests later concluded that the bones were not Susan's, but rather animal remains. The clothing, however, tested positive for male DNA, and efforts continue to identify the person to whom it belongs. The search for Susan's body continues. The Susan Powell case represents one of the most tragic failures of the American justice system. A young mother's desperate warnings were ignored. A manipulative husband was allowed to maintain custody despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. And 3 innocent lives were lost to one man's narcissistic rage. Susan Marie Powell remains a missing person, a haunting symbol of a case that has baffled, angered, and devastated a nation. She is widely believed to have been murdered by her husband, Joshua, a man whose dark secrets were buried so deeply they consumed everyone around him. Her story lives on as a cautionary tale about domestic abuse, the dangers of unchecked obsession, and the catastrophic consequences when institutions fail to protect the vulnerable. The story of the Powell family serves as a chilling reminder of the danger that can hide behind a seemingly normal life. It forces us to ask, what signs do we miss? What does it take for a person to turn on their own family with such calculated cruelty? And how do we protect the vulnerable when the danger lies in the very people they are taught to trust? As we remember Susan, Charlie, and Braden Powell, we must ask ourselves, how many other families are living in fear right now? How many other Susans are writing secret wills, documenting their terror, and praying someone will listen before it's too late? And most importantly, What can we do to ensure that their voices are heard before silence becomes permanent? The search for Susan Powell continues. The fight for justice in her name never ends. And the questions raised by this case demand answers we may never find. What do you think happened to Susan Powell? Do you believe there are others who know more than they've revealed? And how can we better protect families trapped in cycles of abuse and control? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, if you or someone you know is in danger, don't wait. Speak up. Get help. Because Susan Powell's story reminds us that sometimes, tomorrow may be too late. The victims of this case deserve to be remembered not just for the horrific way they died, but for the life they had and the love they shared. Susan, a mother and a daughter. Charlie and Braden, two innocent boys full of life. Their memory deserves to be honored by ensuring their story helps prevent such tragedies in the future. See you in the next one, but until then, stay safe. Stay informed. Stay vigilant.